Hello, and welcome to episode number 40 of TMC, where we are here to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving. Today on TMC, we will be discussing lessons learned while single. This week on TMC, Jamila and I are having some real talk, girl talk. We gave Cedric the week off. We've been talking for a while about the lessons that have been learned, and that's been our theme for the whole month, lessons learned. So we've talked to a couple about lessons learned in marriage, and Cedric and I have talked about lessons that have been learned in different phases and stages in our life. And so today we're here with you to talk about lessons that have been learned as you were single. So, what would you say is one of the first lessons you want to share that you learned while being single?
Oh, wow. It's so much that you learn as being single. And how I start to frame it is that as a female, as a woman, when you think about when men meet each other, the first question they ask is, "Hey, man, what you do? Or what's your work, your occupation?" That's how they really define themselves. But when it comes to females and women, usually the question that they ask you is, "Are you married? Do you have kids?" And so it's
Yeah.
like that becomes a defining thing. And one of the things that I had to learn to be comfortable with was saying I'm single, because sometimes you can get a myriad of reactions when, and it depends on who is asking you too. When you tell people I'm married or I'm single, I get everything from you and how old are you? It's like none of your business. But then too, some men be like, I can't believe you're single. And it's like, well, singleness is a choice. And so one of the things that I had to journey to a place is being comfortable with being single, like, and knowing that it's not a curse. There's not a deficit. It's not a dysfunction. There's nothing wrong with being single, because
Right.
sometimes people reactions can make you feel like, well, I'm less than, or something's wrong with me, or I've even had the question, well, why are you not married yet?
Hmm.
It's not time. So it's like, how they say you have to be comfortable in your own
Your
skin,
own
but
skin.
it's the
Yeah.
same. You have to be comfortable in your own single skin. Like, I'm
Hmm.
okay, and I think I've said it before. Singleness for me is a choice. I've chosen to remain unmarried at this point. There were opportunities I had in the past where I could have entered into a marriage, but
Hmm.
it wasn't God's timing. It wasn't God's plan for me at that point. So for me, it's a choice. And it's not like I'm passive in my life and I'm only single because nobody wants to date me or marry me. That ain't my
Hmm.
story. So
Hmm.
it's having to do that. But then to have this confidence in being single, and it's not an arrogance, but it's a confidence in being single. And I think sometimes we don't see that because people do make singleness to be like a curse or a disease, and it's none of that.
Absolutely. And I like that you said that the first two lessons to be comfortable and confident where you are. And I think that it's important for us as people in any stage of our life, wherever we find ourselves, we have to become comfortable, not complacent for some things, but whatever status you have to be comfortable with that. And it's about how you see it versus how everyone else sees it. And then you walk in the confidence that is you, because you're fearfully and wonderfully made, because God has a purpose and has a plan for your life. Because even if you're single, if you desire to be married, it'll lead to that one day, but you're confident in who you are more than a status, or more than what you're checking off as a box or something of that nature. You're more comfortable as who you are than what people call you.
Right. And when we really start thinking about it, so often we frame marriage as a prize.
Hmm.
But marriage is just another season, is another state. And so when you frame marriage as a prize, then what does that make singleness? It's like you lost or something. And so
Wow.
it's like it is reframing how we see marriage and how we see singleness. Because if we
Exactly.
exalt one above the other, that's when we get all these depressed people because I'm not married and this, and why this, or even if I get married and for some reason either he dies or we get a divorce or whatever else, then it's all this other stuff. Well, because marriage was surprise, I lost the prize, then what's wrong with me? We
Hmm.
have to reframe it in that it's a season, it's a state, and it's neither one is better than the other.
Right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
just having to approach it and reframe it differently, that they are both prizes.
Oh,
I'm,
absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
I'm winning as a single, and when I get married, I'll be winning as a married person. So, but whatever I do, it's almost like I say about losing. I say I never lose. I either win or I learn.
I'll
So I think
learn.
it
Yeah,
applies to my whatever state I'm in. So whether I'm single or married, and marriage is not a husband for me is not a prize.
hmm
There's a lot of work that goes into marriage. There's a lot of things
absolutely.
that goes into relating to someone else. It can be beautiful, but it's not like the lottery. Is not the life lottery. Marriage is not the life lottery. And that's not to say anything negative about marriage, but I think we just have to let go of this idol that we have of marriage.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because what we're talking about, especially with the first lesson that you share, comfortable and confidence. What we're talking about here is walking out whatever season that you're in. So if I'm single, then I'm comfortable and I'm confident as an individual. And then if I'm married, then I'm comfortable and I'm confident as an individual, because you are a unit, but you're still two different people. So both is it's a stage of life. It's exactly what they call it. It's a status. That's it. It's a status. It's a stage that you're in life. You're either single or you're either married. One is not considered above the other, and it should never be, because each one bears their certain benefits. Each one could bear certain disadvantages. And I don't mean that in a negative way, because I am married. And I think that, I love my husband and it's a wonderful thing to be married. But I don't think that someone that's single is losing and I'm winning because I have a spouse. I don't see it that way, because they are able and capable to do things that are different than what I do because I'm married. There's someone else to collaborate with. There's someone else to run this by. There's someone else to give input here and things of that nature. So it's a simple difference, but I agree with you wholeheartedly that a lot of times, and just to be honest, a lot of times it's married people that do it. We can make people feel like, oh, what you mean you ain't married yet? And it's just not something that we should do. And so hopefully, as we continue to talk about it on TMC, the Marriage Coach Podcast, people will learn to be better with that.
Going back to the Bible, when you talk about Paul says, whatever state that you're in,
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to be content in whether there's a mental state or your marital state or your single state. Be content and happy in that, because I tell you, there's a purpose for it. And that's
Oh,
something
yeah,
I would say is that really living on purpose. I understand fully there's a purpose to me being single. It's
absolutely.
connected to my divine destiny. And when you really get a glimpse and you grab a hold to why you're still breathing, why you're still on this earth, then it's a game changer. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm single, it's connected to my divine purpose at this point in time. So the next point in time, I may or may not be married,
Mm-hmm.
but it's connected to what God has called me to do in this moment, in this particular season. And so how can I bemoan that? How can I be sad about God using me and using something that, my singleness for the advancement of his kingdom? How can I be sad about
Mm-hmm.
in certain circles? Like if you were single and they just thought, you said the word marriage, they just all just jumped on you like, well, I can't have. So for the longest, I would not share my desire that I wanted to be married,
Mm-hmm.
because that would open up a whole can of worms that I was like, I'm not trying to fight you today because
Mm-hmm.
about something I want. But and I think that's a myth that you can't be happy and single and still not have the
And
desire to be married.
exactly, exactly.
You
Mm-hmm.
can have both. You can be confident and happy in your current state, but still have a desire for something else. So one
Absolutely.
doesn't negate the other.
Absolutely. And I don't think that we should believe that they do, because even people that are married, you could be married and desire for something to be different, something to be better. That doesn't mean that you are, oh, like, oh, I don't want to be married. No, you just want it to be better. You want it to be whatever it is. So it's nothing wrong with a desire. And I think that it's people have to understand that what you just said is that it's possible to have both. This is something that single, especially women, we need to hear this. And I'm not single, but I'm saying we because I'm a woman. So We need to hear that it's okay that you have the desire, but you don't have to loathe there and like nothing else is gonna work for me and my until this desire is fulfilled. No, what you're doing now is walking out the season that God has you in and living your best life to the fullest of your ability while you're waiting for your desire to be fulfilled. And it would be the same. I would give the same advice to a married person if you're in a situation where, there's a certain circumstance where the marriage should be better or some things could be better, then you walk out and be the best you until the things are better. So you're still desiring that, but you're not allowing it to overtake you. You're not allowing it to control you. So I think that that's awesome. Working on themselves and allowing God to work on them in the process. So
Yeah. And before we move on to the next lesson, which really is that this is a fabulous time to where you really get to connect with you. You have the space to really connect to how you function as a person, as an individual before you get coupled. But when I think about society as a whole, one of the things, there's so many messages sent to women, because if we dial back like 30 years ago, one of the messages was that you can't be a woman, have a husband, and have a successful career. But we've seen that like blown out of the water,
mhm,
so it's like we have to disregard some of the messaging that we hear. Like, it's a book called Lean In, and it's like as women we have to lean in. And I think that applies to, whether it's your career, whether it's your desire to be married but you're still single. You can have, both can coexist peacefully. There's not like a tug of war, going
mhm,
on.
yeah,
But it's not listening to the negative messages that we receive that we can't have. And for
mhm,
me, it's like, if God tell me I can have something, if God is okay with me having something, I don't care what anybody else say. That's what I'm going to stand on. That's what I'm going to anchor in, is that. So it's like, we're talking about singleness today, but there's so many for women. There's so many
yes,
other things to where we hear you. Well, it's hot. You can't do that. You can't. No. You're not gonna put me in a box.
right,
You're not gonna put us in a box, because there's so much we can accomplish while still being other things. So
mhm, absolutely, absolutely. So lesson number 2, you said lesson number 2 was?
excellent time to really do the deep work on yourself. And I think, and I have to start off by saying, I think that, you know, we're going to grow, or we should grow until the day we stop breathing. You're always going to want to do work on yourself, because we're always growing, we're evolving. But like, there's some deep work that I've been able to do to really connect to myself. I was just talking to one of my friends, and we've been friends since third grade, and I was telling her, it got to a place in my life to where I really started to like myself, and I enjoyed my own company. And one
Mm,
of the best vacations I ever went on was by myself. And the reason why I enjoyed that is because I like me and I like my company. But if I
right,
didn't like myself, that would have been a miserable time. I would have been reaching out like, oh, somebody should have came on vacation with me. But I was like happy, and it was I was relaxing, it was peaceful. I got to do what Jamila wanted to do, which I love going to museums. And people don't like going to museums with me because I do read almost every word, and I have nobody saying hurry up. But it was like, this is the vacation I want. And I think, when you're at peace with yourself, you can do things like that. When you can enjoy your own company, you don't always have to feel the need like, I feel a deficit. I need somebody around me. And so I think it's because I had started at that point, it's been some years, but I had started to really do the deep, because I had some deep, transparently, I had some deep soul wounds that I had carried from childhood and teenage years into my
mhm,
adulthood. And so it took me a while to really just say, hey, there's some things you need to work on that are secretly affecting you. Because,
mhm,
like, on a conscious level, I'm all good, but subconsciously, they were really impacting me. And so when I really started to deal with those deep soul wounds, oh my goodness, life just, it's like the blinders came off, the birds were chirping, it was springtime. I see the flowers and they have color in them. And so it's such a beautiful space to work on yourself, because sometimes when you're doing that deep level work, it can take a lot. It's because sometimes you
absolutely,
just have to sit in it, and that could be challenging to sit
mhm.
in it and still have all these other people around
Other
you who are,
responsibilities and other people. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, because what you just said is like profound because I think that sometimes as a single, we can miss that, and when you're in that moment of singleness, it's especially if you're only focused on what you have not obtained yet, as far as the marital status. So I would encourage singles to take this lesson number two and take it to heart as a time you said to connect with you, to do that deep work, because you have the ability, or this gave you the ability to sit there and do that deep work without having a spouse that still needed your attention, without having kids that were still calling your name, without, so you have the time to sit there and really dig into that. Whereas if you're already in a marital relationship, you still can do the deep work, but it's just going to be a lot different than you doing it on your own and you're working through these things. And I think for a lot of people, it also removes some of the issues that we have once we're in a marital relationship or in a dating relationship, because we've had that time to sit with ourselves and be honest and say, okay, I love me and I like me, but I do know that there are some things in me that still need to change. Or I love me, I like me, but I do know that there are some ways that I have that I need to work on. And being single has allowed her now to come to the realization that, okay, if I desire to be married, there's some things I am going to have to shift once I get married. There's some things that will shift once I get married. So that the ability and the time now to sit back and think about what that's going to look like, to do things differently and working on self. And you talked about things from the past and dealing with, so that means I'm learning to deal with my wounds. So I'm bandaging them up, and I'm doing the work so that they could heal, so that they could heal. And I realized that even if I still carry that this happened to me, or that it happened to me, around me, near me, whatever, it affected me, it doesn't have to control me.
That's
That's
it.
what it is. It doesn't have to control me. So it happened. It was real. It's true. I recognize it now. So now I'm in control of it, because I really feel like we cannot control how things rise up in us if we don't know they're there. If you don't know that that wound is there, when it starts seeping, you
Mm.
don't even know what it is. It's just oozing pus. And you get this ugly thing is coming up, but you have no clue where it's coming from. It's just like, where is that? Where did that come from? And if you do the work, then you know that the wound is there. You do the work to work on it, to fix it, to help it to be better, so that when it rises up, you can say, okay, I know what this is. And now I have other questions to ask myself. You know, is this really what I think it is, or is this me connecting this to that? Is this really happening, or am I connecting it to that? And the only way to do that is to know that that wound was there.
Right. Because, it'll come up in the way that we relate to people,
Hmm.
whether it's the dating relationship, whether it's coworkers, because what happens is that when you have a trauma of something like that, we tend to filter experiences like that. My example is that, if you have a certain lens on, somebody can say something to you and not mean it that way, but oh, I won't even say people. I have done that sometimes. Somebody will say
Yes.
something to me, and because my hearing wasn't focused right,
Uh
I
huh.
just did the whole separate and went straight left real
Oh
quick. And
yeah.
it's
Oh
like,
yeah. I know about that. Hmm.
and then when I, we have an opportunity to have that clarifying conversation, it's like, that's not what I meant. And I'm like, oh, my bad. But
And sometimes that's not even what I said. Like, oh, well, I thought I had heard. Exactly.
and so they're so important that because who you are is a foundation. That's the
Hmm.
thing that I think we can't disconnect for those singles who do desire to get married. The stuff that you're doing today does impact your tomorrow.
Oh
And
yeah.
tomorrow includes marriage. The stuff that you're doing today, or I can say it like this, the stuff that you're not doing today will
Oh yeah.
impact your tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
So it's, doing the work, it pays dividends both short term and long
And
term.
long
I'm
term.
able
Hmm.
to have better relationships now. And then the hope and the desire is that then tomorrow I'll have a better marriage relationship.
Absolutely, absolutely. It would be good to think of it as a time of preparation, even for whatever life is going to look like beyond right now. Even I mean, I'm married. I never think like, oh, I'm preparing for if I'm not married. No, that's not what I'm doing. But I always look at preparing myself for the future. So if I'm preparing myself for the future, in the same sense, then I would encourage someone who's single. If you're preparing yourself for the future, then what is the future you desire, as well as being ready to obtain that future? Because we've talked about this several times in the past. We talk about it all the time. We also can't go into a relationship expecting something that we can't give. And so we have that time. And it's like you have that time and that space when you're single to dig deep, to uproot the things that need to be uprooted to be the same person that you desire to attract.
Right, because that's one, what they say, you can't expect something that you're not.
Hmm.
But how many times did we do?
Yeah.
I don't expect nobody to have a six pack because you know what?
I know
That ain't
that's
my fitness goal in life is to have a six pack unless I'm going to the store to buy one. So it's like you got to have this, you got to have that. Well, do you have that?
yes.
We can take it down to a real level. Like we can think that of our friends sometimes. It's like, but
Mhm.
are you that type of friend? We want
Absolutely.
somebody to be this type of friend to us, but it's like, are you that type of friend? I think it's proper to say to have friends, you have to show yourself friendly. Are you
That's
friendly?
it.
You
That's
want
it.
somebody to be friendly towards you, but you got a bad attitude.
Exactly. 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 And it's time to work on it. Time to do that deep work. I like that. I like that. So what would be the third lesson?
Now, this is a really powerful one, and I would say in the last few years it became even clearer and more profound for me. Is that but I think it's something that will help you in whether you're married or single. Is you have to be able to discern who's speaking into your life and what type of advice you receive.
Mm.
I can't. That's a huge one because especially in a certain season of my life, I was getting all type of feedback on
Oh, come on.
the reasons why I was not married. And the honest to God truth was that I was not married because God told me it is not your time
Not
to be
time.
married. So, but I was hearing you're not open enough, and it was so funny because when I lived in Houston, I was like a social butterfly. I would go out do different things, volunteer. I had a full life, and so then somebody would be like, "You need to get out more." I'm like, "Actually, I need to stay home more. I'm tired." Like, so you're getting all this feedback, and it's like, yeah, I don't even know. Like, so
Exactly.
and for me, what I had to do was find a nice and civil way to tell someone thank you, but that doesn't apply to my life. And even
Mhm.
today, sometimes I still get sometimes unsolicited and solicited feedback that doesn't align with my life. And
Mhm.
it's like I have to then it's like I have to be a good connoisseur of the information I'm given. And some stuff I just have to straight out reject and be like,
Absolutely.
it doesn't apply
Absolutely.
to me. But I think as singles, you get a lot. People want they act like you don't know what's going on in your own life, so you get a lot of like micromanaging sometimes, and it can
Mhm.
be irritating. It's like I have to tell people I'm still a grown woman. I'm not married, but I'm still grown.
That's good. As people, we should be careful what advice we give, first of all. I think if it's unsolicited, you should just keep it. Meaning, if they didn't ask you for it, keep it. Now, if they ask you for it, then you want to speak slowly and you want to speak with wisdom, allowing the Holy Spirit time to speak to you and for you to hear what you need to hear to say to them, to guide them. And a lot of times, just asking more questions instead of being so quick to give instruction. Oh, you need to do this. Oh, this how you, girl, let me
Mhm.
tell you, you know how you kiss that man. You got to do this and do that and do this. No, no, just listen, ask more questions, and just for a person responding to your questions, and when I say questions, I don't mean questions like getting in a business. I just mean questions that would prompt them to think about if I'm soliciting your advice, then ask me a question that'll prompt me to dig deeper in my own self instead of you just thinking that you're gonna give me an answer. No, give me a question that's gonna make me dig deeper so I can see. Because sometimes just talking it out, you be like, you know what? I was seeing that all wrong. You know what? I was thinking about that all. No, you're right. And they ain't even said nothing. You're right. I should, because they asked you the right question. Cedric does that to me all the time. He'll say, "Well, what do you think? Oh, that's interesting. Such and such, such, such." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't think about that." And then you think about it, or you start to line it up, and it's like you answered the question yourself. So the advice it wasn't necessary for it to be instructional advice. It was just like him talking and listening and asking a question that made me go deeper so that I can know what decision I need to make or what path I want to take. And it was me talking it out myself. And the same thing for if you're talking to someone that's coming to you about advice in their singleness, then you're talking to them to make them think about what they're thinking about, and then they'll walk it out themselves.
Right. And one of the things a long time ago, this guy told me a phrase, and it stuck with me, and I use it even to this day. He said, "You eat the fish and you spit out the bone." Good country saying,
uh
but it applies in when you get in relationship advice. Like, I've had to use it in the PhD program, because you do get a lot of like feedback. You should be doing this, you need to do this, and it's just like, what is best for me in my situation? Okay, that can apply. No, okay, let me throw that one out. And one of the things I've learned is that not to get so hibbity dibbity when people giving me stuff, and it's just like, okay, thank you for sharing. I can just
hmm
say thank you for
yeah.
sharing, because
hmm
apparently you felt like you needed to share. Thank you
hmm
for sharing. Maybe there's something I can glean from your story. But that's one of the things. Being a sounding board is wonderful, because it's just like what you said. The person then, they know their situation better than anybody else.
hmm
They're walking in their shoes.
hmm
So then they can say, if you're asking those probing questions, it's like in counseling. So when I used to recruit for a college, at the college fairs, the students just come up, "I want to be a counselor, I want to be a psychiatrist, because I like to give advice." And I'm like, no, that's not what they do. They're actually facilitators and guide along. But when I actually, like, I took a counseling skills class and counseling theories class, and when you really learn about the counseling process, you're not there giving all your information and your input.
Mm-mm.
You're a guide along the process, and it's the person that who goes have to go deep and like you said, come to that enlightenment or that revelation or that answer or whatever else. You're not there telling them, well, this is exactly what you need to do and this is how you fix that problem. That's not how counseling
Mm-mm.
works. And I think a lot of times we have the drill sergeant approach to being friends and giving
Yes.
advice, and this is what you need to do. Well, does that fit my situation? And a
hmm
lot of times it doesn't, because I'm not telling you, it's impossible for me to tell you all the different elements
Variances.
of what's
Yep.
going
Yes.
on.
Yes. In one little setting. It's
Right.
impossible. It's impossible. Even when we're talking on TMC, we're always telling couples, we're always saying to our singles, everybody, there's variances in everything. You have to look at your situation and look at what part fits you and what part will work for you. If I'm saying you need to sit and you need to talk about this, if you have somebody that is like belligerent and you guys or it's a domestic situation, it's gonna be a little difficult to sit down and talk to them. So you're gonna have to either get a mediator or something. So you have to adjust for your situation. So with everything, you have to look at it through a lens, I guess similar to what you said. You eat the fish, spit out the bones. What part works for you? And what part is going to line up with where you are in your life, and what part you need to leave behind. What part do you need to just say, okay, thank, like you said, thank you for that, and keep it moving. And sometimes I think we don't even have to address it, just like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that is so true, because one of the things that came back to me is that I had lived in a particular city for like over a decade, and God told me it was time for me to move. And I would say the hardest part is when people who are really close to you are giving you advice and feedback that don't align with what you're supposed to be doing. And that's hard because you trust them, you've given them
hmm
space to speak into your life. And I can remember I had a really good friend who was like, it ain't time for you to move. You're moving out of your flesh and all that other stuff. But it really was time. God had told me to move. And I had to basically ignore her advice and still move forward. But I think it goes back to connecting to number one. I had the confidence and I was comfortable in the
Yes.
decisions that I was making. And I knew that number one, this was a decision God was allowing me to make, and He was okay with it. And then, it just, everything was falling into place. And when I tell you, it has been one of the best decisions, it was time for me to move at that time. I would not be sitting here with you at this level of healing if I had not left that
Mm-hmm.
place, because that was my journey was shifting. But
Mm-hmm.
it was really hard because, I had it from everybody, family and friends. Are you sure you want to move? Is this the time for you to move? And I was getting questioned, but I knew within myself that it was time for me to move. And one of the things I always have to tell people is that at the end of the day, and this sounds really rude, but it's not, this is my life.
Oh
And
yeah, it's the
I
truth.
have to live with the outcomes and the consequences, whether the decision is fruitful or not. I have to live with that and I have to be okay with that. So when I'm making a decision, even my decision about moving and going enrolling in school, I had to make that decision. And whether, I had to be okay. And when I'm making a decision, I tell myself, can you be okay with whatever consequence or decision
Mm-hmm.
comes from this? And so that makes me okay, because I have to give an account of my life. You can't give an account
Absolutely.
for me.
Mm-mm.
And I think sometimes, but it's helped me, and I'm still growing, but it helps me too when I'm offering up my opinion. Because sometimes I can offer up my opinion like it's fact, but it's never fact in your life. And so
Absolutely.
when it's done to me, it's like, okay, I need to check myself to make sure I'm not doing that to others, because I'm not the authority on your life. Jesus and you should be the authority on your life, not me. And I'm an outsider. I don't know everything that's going on, but it can be really challenging when it's people you love and you trust and who have previously given you great advice,
Great
but you
advice.
have to
Mm-hmm.
know what it is in your season. And my thing is, going back to recruiting, and I used to tell them college is different than high school. That if you fail, you're gonna get all the credit. If you succeed, you're gonna get all the credit, and that's how, but that's how I feel about my life. It's I have to take responsibility, and I think that's a good thing about being a good wise advice giver is
Mm-hmm.
that the person at the end of the day has to take ownership and responsibility for the things in their life, because that's it's on them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we have talked about three lessons, and I think they three very great lessons that you're sharing with us that you've learned while single. And I think this is some important information, definitely some ground for someone to build on to get to a level where they are comfortable and confident in who they are while they're single, and that they're confident and comfortable in the choices and decisions that they're making. And then also taking it as a time to connect with self, taking it with as a time to, in your singleness, taking that as a time to do that deep work, to heal the wounds of the past, to deal with the things in yourself that you want to be better, the things that you would like to be better, the things that should be better, the things that need to be better, whatever it is, things that you need to pull out, put on, whatever it is, you using this as a time to prepare yourself. We call it a time of preparation, preparing you for wherever you're going moving forward, preparing you for the future of whatever your life is going to be. And then the last thing that you shared with us, the last and final lesson was discerning who you allow to speak into your life. And we gave a variety of different circumstances and situations, but I think it's important for us to take away from that we have to know our own selves
Mhm.
and know that at the end of the day, whoever, if we follow what someone speaks to us, we're still the ones that's going to live with the consequences of it. So I can say, well, Jamila told me that, no, I wouldn't have did that, but I'm still going to have to live with the results of it. So you have to listen, and first of all, hopefully you're getting counsel from wise counsel, and wise counsel is going to do more asking questions to prompt you to think about the choice that you need to make. I thank God for the lessons that you have learned that you are able to share with others on today. And I really feel like we're focusing on the singles because you're single. We're talking to the singles, but I really feel like every lesson that you shared is it's very well pliable across the board for people. Period. We talked about women, especially because we're both women, but these are lessons that people can apply all across the board. So a lesson that you have learned can be useful and helpful to someone in every stage in life, because even as married women, we still have to be comfortable and confident where we are. We have to be confident and comfortable in who we are. We need to do if we haven't done the deep work when we were single, like for myself, Cedric and I got married young. I didn't know nothing about doing no deep work then, but I had to do deep work while being married, to be a better version of myself. And if you're married and you didn't know about deep work, you still have the ability and the time to do that deep work. Sit down with your spouse and talk about it, and talk about the things that you need to do. Maybe go after some coaching, go after some counseling, whatever it takes to do the deep work, and sit with your significant other and talk about it. Sit with yourself if you're single and work it out, write it out. And I think the last one, definitely discerning who we allow to speak into our lives. And that works for you, whether you're single, whether you're married. You married, be careful who you're getting advice from.
Yes, Lord.
You married, don't run, go get advice. And I'm saying this, and I don't mean it in a negative way. You can't get advice about marriage from your single friends that have never experienced marriage. You just want to be careful who you're getting advice from, period.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think one of the reasons why these lessons are so applicable in different situations, and I think I've said it before, that, if when I look at my life, if you take the word single away, you take away the adjective that I'm a single person. Number one, I'm a person. Number two,
Mm-hmm.
this is a life. It's just
Mm-hmm.
life, is that we're doing life. And so, we're talking, in my context and my perspective is that, I'm unmarried, so
Mm-hmm.
that's the frame that I'm in. But if you take away that unmarried life, the root word, the root noun there is still life. In that,
Mm-hmm.
we're here to do life and thrive in life and thrive in our relationships. And so I think that's why, whether you're single or you're married, this can apply and be helpful and beneficial to you, whether you're a man or a woman. It's
Oh
all
yeah.
the same, because it's life. At the end of the day, this is life.
Well, Jamila, we thank you once again. And we want to take this time to thank our TMC listeners for joining us today. If you found this information useful or helpful, we want you to subscribe, click the notification button, turn on your notifications so that you will be notified every week when we upload a video. If you're listening on iTunes, we want you to rate the podcast and leave a review. That helps us get the word out. We also want to encourage you to head on over to our leadership podcast, Lead to Greatness, where my husband is interviewing entrepreneurs and great leaders from all around the world every week.
Thank you for joining us on TMC today. We've enjoyed hanging out with you, and we look forward to joining you next week, where we are here to help you take your relationship from surviving to thriving.
Bye. See you next week.